I have never changed so fast in my entire life. My wife and I were in the room, hurry up, honey, you gotta hurry up and go up. Wow, let me just spontaneous moment. I did not share this in the first service. I should have asked for permission, but sometimes I do this. Just a cool story about one of the brothers who got baptized. In fact, the first guy who got baptized, he couldn't really walk straight. Let me just share a quick story before I get into the word. About maybe half a year ago, my wife and I were in downtown Buena Park Mall because we had to go see if there was additional space that we could rent on a Monday morning. And as we're leaving the leasing's office, there's this guy who starts running towards us. And the dude's tall, he's like 6'2", 6'3". He's like, hello, excuse me. And I got a testimony, so I was kind of like, yo, back up, dog, what's good? And he says, are you guys the pastors of Beloved Church? I was like, yeah, we are, man. He's like, hey, I know this might sound strange, but one of my friends at work has been sharing the gospel with me, and I've never been to church my entire life, but I've been watching your guys' Spotify, and I recognize your face. And I was like, bro, our church is literally right here on Sundays. And this is how I knew he wasn't churched. He said, I love your gospel. And the second question he said was, do you guys have merch? I was like, second question. I was like, hey, Darren, in fact, we are selling merch this Sunday for an anniversary service. So if you come to our church, merch on me. And this brother, I ran into him that Sunday. I gave him a free t-shirt, and he's been here every single week since then. Come on, somebody. And he got baptized, and he has given his life to Jesus. We are finishing the book of Mark today. If you've been with Beloved, we've been in the book of Mark for 17 months. A long, long journey under the series titled Following the Suffering King. But as we land this plane in Mark 16, today we're following the risen King. We're going to read this passage as we normally do. We are in Mark 16, verses 1 through 8. And this is what Mark records for the church. He says, when the Sabbath was passed, Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, and Salome brought spices so that they might go and anoint Jesus. Jesus has just been crucified, and they want to give him a proper burial. It says, very early on the first day of the week, which was Sunday, when the sun had risen, they went to the tomb. And they were saying to one another, who will roll away the stone for us from the entrance of the tomb? And looking up, they saw the stone had already been rolled back, and it was very large. And entering the tomb, they saw a young man sitting on the right side, dressed in a white robe, and they were alarmed. And he said to them, do not be alarmed. You seek Jesus of Nazareth, who was crucified. He has risen. He is not here. I won't have you say it again. Look at your neighbor and say, he's not here. Look at your other neighbor and say, he has risen. See the place where they laid him. But go and tell his disciples and Peter that he is going before you to Galilee. There you will see him just as he told you. And they went out and fled. They fled because they were not expecting this. This is the first Easter. They fled from the tomb, for trembling and astonishment had seized them, and they said nothing to anyone, for they were afraid. I don't know if you are anything like me. Maybe it's because I didn't really grow up in the church. There are regular times in my daily life where I doubt the existence of God. There are regular times, not even just when I'm having a hard time. I'm just driving to church and I'm like, is he real? Talking to my wife and we're planning for the church. I'm like, is this thing actually legit? I doubt the very faith at times that I have devoted my life to live on and even give my life for as a career. Let's be honest, don't judge me. I know you'd be reading Exodus, you're like, the Red Sea, really? Really, Prince of Egypt? I know you'd be thinking, did he really feed 5,000 people? Weren't there just, maybe there was just extra food on the side that they didn't know? I mean, it's to the point where I say this regularly to my wife. We're laying in bed and I look at my wife and I say this. I say, honey, if this thing that we have dedicated our life to happens now to be real, I say to her, just want you to know it was still worth it for me. I lived a fulfilled and good life with you. And if I don't see you in heaven, just know that I love you. That's how real my wife and I get at times. Several years ago, when I was at Biola University getting my Bible degree and my master's degree in divinity, I was going through one of those moments where the doubts that I had were at the forefront of my mind. And being the way I am, being a little more aggressive, and I'm an Enneagram 8, so I'm kind of outspoken, especially when my skepticism is in the forefront of my brain, I started asking my professor all these questions in the middle of his lecture. Y'all know those kids who forget that there's other students in the class and they're like annoying everybody that's there. I'm having a full-on conversation with my professor, and I just kept asking him question after question after question about the credibility of Scripture. And then him being the guru that he is, the New Testament scholar that he is, and he's pastored all these college students who go through this university, he stops and he pauses and he momentarily holds the lecture and he says something along the lines of this to me. He said, Will, there are many parts of the Bible that I still don't fully understand. But when those doubts come, I always come back to this. He says, I read the Bible through the resurrection. And then he says, Will, if Jesus rose from the grave and he quotes from the Old Testament, his testimony of quoting the Old Testament validates the authority of those scriptures. I was like, okay, cool. And then if he himself commissions these apostles then to write the New Testament, and he rose from the grave, his resurrection gives credibility to the peoples that he sanctioned to write the Gospels and the New Testament. And when he said this, I was reminded of Apostle Paul, who was the first true Pharisaic leader who mobilized Judaism to martyr Christians. He was there to martyr the first Christian named Stephen. It says that Saul was there authorizing the murdering of the first century Christians, specifically Stephen. But he later has an encounter with the resurrected Jesus. Why? Let me tell you this. Many people died on the cross, but only one person rose in the tomb. And Apostle Paul says in 1 Corinthians 15:14, he's like me right now, he's keeping it real. He's talking to people and he's telling them something. He says, yo, listen to me. If Christ has not been raised from the dead, all our preaching is useless and your faith is useless. He's saying we're wasting our time. And we apostles will all be lying about God, for we have said that God raised Christ from the grave. What Apostle Paul and my professor and Peter and James and John and Luke and Mary and Martha, all these first eyewitness testimonies are trying to tell us if Jesus did not rise from the dead, none of this matters. If the tomb was not empty, not only is my doubt valid, my doubt is right. But if he did rise from the grave, every word in this book matters. Every promise in the word is alive and active. And every doubt and every question that we have deserves another look. This morning, I want us to go back to the very first Easter. Because the closer you are to the historical event, the more accurate the details are, because they were the first eyewitnesses of the empty tomb. We discover in Mark chapter 16, verses 1 through 8, that the resurrection changes everything. And from this passage, we are going to learn we are not the only ones who struggle with doubt. Even the first century followers and the first eyewitnesses also had their own doubts. And we're going to see that the resurrection meets us in our doubts and invites us to look again. I want you guys to notice right when these women get to the tomb, as they're going there, they have a spontaneous conversation because they're like, oh shoot, we never thought about this. Who's gonna roll the stone away? The stone is large. Mark gives that adjective, a detail. He says there's a huge stone, and they're having this impromptu conversation because they forgot the details of how they're gonna do this. And once they get there, the stone is already rolled away. But here's my point. The stone was not rolled away for Jesus to get out. The stone was rolled away so that they can go in. If you actually read the gospel, something happens to Jesus after he gets a glorified body. That brother walks through walls. In John chapter 20, it literally says the doors were locked and the disciples were terrified and scared. And it says Jesus just shows up, which means that when we get to heaven, our glorified bodies, our cellulites are gonna be gone. Come on, somebody. Y'all didn't even catch what that is, huh? No more Botox. I'm just playing, right? We're gonna have glorified bodies and a whole new experience. So if Jesus could walk through walls, why is the stone rolled away? I'll tell you why, so that we can go in to verify that the tomb is actually empty. He's inviting us in not to have blind faith, not to have hopeful wishing. He's inviting us in to see the facts of an empty grave so we can stand in confidence of a risen King. Come on, somebody. Thank you for the clap, Ben. If I was in LA, they'd be shouting me down, bro. Not only that, I want you guys to notice this. Mark mentions the names of these women repeatedly, over and over and over. If you've been with us the past few weeks, you know this is not the first time Mark says Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, Salome. He says it 3 times that these women were both at the cross and at the tomb. Mark 15:40 says, there were also women looking on from a distance, among whom were Mary Magdalene and Mary the mother of James, the younger, and of Joseph and Salome. Cool. Thanks for that detail, Mark. He goes on in verse 47. Mary Magdalene and Mary the mother of Joseph saw where Jesus was laid. This is after he's crucified. And then now, as we read this morning in 16:1, he says it again. When the Sabbath was passed, Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, and Salome bought spices so that they might go and anoint him. So here's the question. Mark, why the repetition? We all took that writing class in senior year. Don't repeat yourself. Why do you say their names over and over and over? It's because New Testament scholars say this is what they call literary intention. New Testament scholar Richard Bachman, in his book, Jesus and the Eyewitnesses, points out this is how ancient biographies grounded their claims. If you're writing a legend or a myth, you don't worry about including the names of eyewitnesses. But these women, Bachman says, are not random. They were the most well-known and respected individuals in their early Christian community. Furthermore, another New Testament scholar, Craig Bloomberg, says this. He says, ancient historians give more credence and value to living eyewitnesses than written documents. Because if these eyewitnesses were alive, you can cross-examine them. Oh, isn't it so refreshing to know that this book has some credibility in a day of fake news where everything has to be fact-checked, where you don't even know what's true or not, so you have to talk to what they call in research primary sources. Why? 3 women. He's saying this. You know Mary Magdalene. You know Mary, mother of James. You know Salome. Fact check them and let them have a conversation. In other words, what Mark is saying is this. Here are the receipts. This is a footnote. This is the bibliography and the citations of first eyewitnesses. This is where it gets a little more interesting as well. By the way, I'm taking you to my seminary class. This is what I learned, because you wish it's true. You're like, is Christianity? My mom told me it is. But when I started learning about the credibility of the resurrection, it changed everything in my life. Furthermore, the naming of these women make the resurrection both believable and unbelievable for the same reason. It's because they're women. This is written in the first century. Be it Jewish societies, Roman societies, Greco-Roman societies, in the first century, women were legally not allowed to testify in court. Just like in the 19th century where women were not allowed to vote, any eyewitness account testimonies in the first century were dismissed in the court of law because women were oppressed. This would be so of Jesus to purposely choose women to be the first eyewitnesses, to say that his heart is for the outsider, his heart is for the marginalized, his heart is for the oppressed, and he puts the gospel into their lips to testify of the risen King. Come on, somebody, I'm preaching today. First service, I didn't have this much energy because I was still nervous. What I'm trying to say is this. Scholars point out, if Mark, Matthew, Luke, and John were trying to fabricate a story, they would have never said women were the first eyewitnesses. Because immediately, the first century audience would have dismissed their testimonies as something that was not credible unless it's true. That will be the only reason why they would do that. And here's my last point about this, about doubt. Do you notice the apostles are nowhere to be seen? They're gone, bro. That's why, I always say this, women are loyal, man. They stick with you to the end. Brothers with peace, dog. The men are nowhere to be seen. Have you ever thought about this? Tim Keller says this. He says, Jesus repeatedly told the disciples, hey, after 3 days, I'm going to rise from the grave. Told them like early on and later, he said, okay, maybe you didn't catch this. I'm going to be delivered over to Pontius Pilate. You all going to deny me and betray me. But I'm going to rise in the 3rd day. I think, have you ever thought the disciples never looked at each other and said, guys, it's the 3rd day. Maybe we should go to the tomb to see if the tomb is empty. Let me tell you why they didn't go. It's because just like us, resurrection did not fit in their worldview in the first century. Oftentimes, people dismiss the resurrection saying, you know what, first century people, they're not like modern people. They didn't have medicine. They're superstitious. They believed in miracles. No. Jews then and Jews now still don't believe anyone could rise from the dead in 4 days. Not only that, there is no way in their religion and tenets of faith that a human being can be God. That's why when Jesus looks at the crowds and says, before Abraham was, I am. which is an echoing of Exodus when God tells Moses, my name is I am, which is Jesus saying, I am Yahweh. I was before Moses. I was before Abraham. I was before the foundations of the world. And what do the religious leaders do? They pick up stones. Because they're like, this is blasphemy. What I'm trying to say is this. Their absence is not just failure. It's proof that nobody was expecting this. They were not expecting this. What Mark is trying to say to us is that they had doubts no different than we have doubts. But he's inviting us to look again at the empty tomb. Mark is saying, look at the empty tomb. Look at the names. Look at the most unlikely witnesses. And look at the disciples who didn't show up. He's saying this is not a fabricated tale. This is not legend. This is not myth. He's saying, I put my life on it. I'm going to die for it. In fact, all the original followers said, I'm going to get crucified like him. I'm going to get martyred like him because I saw the risen King. Now, the resurrection doesn't merely speak to our doubts on an intellectual level. It also speaks to our hearts on a personal level. The resurrection offers us a restoration of grace and hope in God. I want you guys to look at verse 7. It says, but go, tell his disciples and Peter that he is going before you to Galilee. Did you guys catch that? Because I didn't catch it until I read this book. It's 2 words. And Peter. It's 2 words. And Peter. When I first became a Christian, this was the first book I ever read, and we gifted it to people who got baptized today. In this chapter, he says that word, and Peter, is a treasure of grace. Why? Just use your imagination with me. The disciples, they're chilling in someone's house. They're chopping it up. And these women, the sisters, they run like, yo, we went to the grave. We ran here as fast as we can. He's not there. We saw an angel, dazzling white. His body's gone. The angel told us to come tell you that Jesus goes ahead of you to Galilee. Like he told you, he wants to meet you there. Guarantee. Peter probably would have said something like this. You guys can go. He is not talking about me. After what I have done, after my denial, after my betrayal, I denied him and I denied my own values. I didn't live up to my promise. I can't face him. I don't even deserve to be in the presence if he even did resurrect from the dead. And then you know what the women say? Oh, Peter. No, he said, and you. He said, he didn't say, and Thomas. He didn't say, and James, John. The angel specifically told us that Jesus told him to say, tell the disciples, and you, the biggest screw up, the biggest mess up, the hopeless one, the struggling one, the divorced one, the broke one, the one that's in debt, the one that has doubt, the one that feels shame, he's calling you out because the resurrection restores our standing with Jesus Christ. It offers us the grace of what he did on our behalf. Oh, thank you. Jesus. You see, in the cross, Jesus absorbed Peter's sins. But in the resurrection, he restored his future. Too many people come to church not knowing Easter is about the power to change. It's about the power of the resurrection to take impossible situations, to turn it around in redemption and restoration, because he still has a plan for Peter, which means he still has a plan for you. Because the same Spirit that rose Jesus from the grave, Paul says, is now inside of you to have hope. In other words, you no longer need to live defeated lives. The resurrection could break the chain of addiction. The resurrection could break the generational curses of your parents and your grandparents. The resurrection changes everything for anyone who puts their faith in Christ. I have a quote for you. I've said it before, but it's my favorite quote. And if you've been around Beloved, you know who I'm about to quote. Pastor Tim Keller. I almost made a t-shirt with his face on it. Not to sell, just to honor him for taking all his stuff. Just to say I'm sorry and thank you for helping out this young pastor by keeping all your sermons online. This is what Tim Keller says about this moment with Peter. This is so powerful. Tim Keller says, Peter was the biggest screw-up. And because his screw-up was the biggest, his repentance will be the deepest. And his grasp of grace will be the greatest. And that will make him the most qualified person to be a leader in Jesus' movement. Failure feels like death. A failed marriage, a failed career, a failed relationship, a failure in finances. But if you let your failures drive you deeper into the gospel, it becomes a resurrection. If you let your failures drive you into the gospel that says you're not saved by your works and your past, but by Christ's work and Christ's past, then you know what happens? You know why it becomes a resurrection? You come to see more than ever the costliness of his love, the radicalness of his grace, and you see your own flaws, but you also see how infinitely and endlessly loved you are. And Peter, and William, and Andrea, and Daniel, and Darren. If you can't see your name in that "and," you're not going to experience the power of the resurrection this morning. The last thing I'll say as the praise team comes up, the resurrection, after it invites us to look again in the middle of doubt, after the resurrection restores us into grace, the resurrection sends us out to live with purpose. The angel tells these women, don't be alarmed. He's not here. He's risen. And these 4 words change it all for them. Now go and tell. They come to the grave looking for comfort, but they leave with a commission. They come to the grave with mourning, but they leave as messengers. And what this angel and what Jesus is saying is now your purpose in life is not to be successful. Your purpose in life is not to get married. Your purpose in life is not to be wealthy, because you've tried all that, but did it not fail you and leave you more empty? But now your purpose is to go and live for him and tell the world about everything that he's done for you. Church, listen to me. Every other thing we live for is quicksand. It's like building a house on sand that's muddy. Aren't we all looking for that one thing to live for? Which is why we think, oh, if I find this job, if I just find the right boss, I'm gonna be fulfilled. And you find that job and you say, next job. If I get my calling, I'm gonna feel fulfilled. Or how about this? If I just meet that guy, 6'3", 220, jacked, right? Or if I just meet that girl. And what happens after your second divorce? Still empty. Because we were made for purpose. We were made for love. But it can't be found in broken creation. It has to be found in our Creator, where our restless hearts can find rest in Him. Where our broken souls can find healing in His hands. And He's telling them, He rose. The tomb is empty. Paul says, oh death, where is your sting? Oh death, you've been swallowed up from the risen King. Now go and tell the world that He lives and the tomb is empty. What I'm trying to say is this: you will not be fulfilled until you live for Him. You will not find the strength you're looking for until you live for Him. That is what Easter is about. Everything changed for me. Everything changed for me when I was in high school. Living for my friends. Because I stopped living for my parents because I was already a failure at a way too young of an age. My little kids, 6'3" and 2, or 6'4" and 2, or 6'4" and 3. That was not a planned joke. They just want to please me. Daddy, look. Daddy, look. And I look. They're just going like, buh. I look like, Daddy, look again. They're going like, buh. I'm like, what? Because they want to please me. But because I was such a bad kid, I already gave up on pleasing my parents. I gave up pleasing my teachers. So I was trying to please my friends. I was living for my friends. But living for the world is like drinking ocean water. It might quench your thirst for a moment, but it leaves you more thirsty, and eventually it'll kill you. That day came where I came to church and I heard the gospel. I heard about what He did and how He rose to conquer the grave. And He invites me in. Will, I know you have doubts. I know you're naturally a skeptic. But when you don't know, hold on to what you do know. The tomb was empty. The tomb has no body. Now go and live for me. And tell the world. Let's all stand to our feet. This is what I wanted to do today. First, if you're here and you're a seeker or you're a skeptic and you want to know who Jesus is during this response time, have a moment where you talk to God and say, God, if you're real and if you're out there and if this Jesus is who this pastor or this crazy Korean guy is saying on stage, I want to receive Him and I want to know Him when I give my life to you, because it's not about the content of your prayers, it's about the intent of your heart. But for the rest of us who know it's true, and when I say no, it's a gift of the Holy Spirit. There is a supernatural confidence inside of you in the midst of doubt that says He must have risen. We're just going to close this Easter Sunday by declaring what Jesus did 2,000 years ago, okay? Just want to say this and I'll get off. I want us to sing this song like we were just at the Dodgers game this past week, okay? I said earlier, like 50% of our church was at that Dodgers game. And I know, how do you say his name? Shohei? Don't judge me. I know when Shohei came up to bat, people went bananas. Or when the Lakers just started the playoffs, they went crazy. But how much more should we go crazy, especially on Easter Sunday, for a King who rose from the grave, who knows you by name, who redeems and secures your future, who forgives your past, who doesn't just forgive you but gives you a new life, who takes away away your heart of stone and gives you a heart of flesh, who puts inside of you the Holy Spirit so that you may have victory and courage. I don't want to shout for the Dodgers. I don't want to shout for the Lakers. I want to shout for my risen King who rose from the grave 2,000 years ago to show me that my faith can stand on confident rock. So we're going to end this afternoon by singing, declaring, praising, and worshiping. And I want to invite you just for 5 minutes. Beloved, is all about mental health. We're all about being safe. We're all about boundaries. But for the next 4 minutes, no boundaries. Sing loud, clap hard, shout your depression away sometimes, because praise and worship can do what therapy can't sometimes. So for the next 5 minutes, let's give our King, our resurrected Jesus, the worship that he deserves.